Hello there. My name is Alex and I'm a DCI vet, and welcome to my series in which I document and report on every drum corps with enough knowledge to document on in alphabetical order. This video takes us to the USA, and more specifically California. Our subject today is Nightfire. This information comes courtesy of the co-founder and director. All content was emailed to me, including pictures of members and a full corps picture. All other pictures are personally sourced by me. Keep in mind these memories are 30 years old. They may not be entirely accurate, but this is the way I remember. Nightfire didn't start out as Nightfire, or even in Los Angeles. Its very beginning roots were a corps in San Diego that only existed on paper for the longest time. Sometime in the very late 80s and early 90s, Rick Mann gathered a group of people that included myself and Velvet Knights drum major and SoCal announcer, Ryan Turner. He wanted to form a corps in San Diego, which hadn't been a corps of any level for years, possibly decades. I believe the last one had been the Golden Statesman in the pre-DCI era. The greatest impediment to fielding a corps prior to 2000 was the requirement for the brass line to be G horns, and brass instruments were expensive. You could always bring in a scholastic drumline or guard to serve those roles, but the brass was the major roadblock. If you had no money, you're on the outside looking in. Still, we persisted in trying to pull things together, and after Rick moved out of the area, he gave the corps to Randy McRae, who gave it to me after a time due to no movement. I kept it alive on paper all by myself. The only things we'd done was provide a name, Pacific Sound. I made one t-shirt design, and Rick had obtained uniforms before leaving, the ones the freelancers used in 1985. Pants and tunic tops, no shakos because they were still active in using them. In 1992, I moved to Los Angeles to be with my wife, who had moved there shortly after we married in 1991 after getting laid off. For me, you never saw someone happier to lose a job. I moved up the same night. I thought about moving Pacific Sound to LA, but realized I didn't want to deny my hometown a chance to have its own corps, so I gave it to Bob Stolberg, who eventually got them to field as the San Diego Earthquake. By this time, I'd hooked up with Phantom Regiment alumni Jeff Davis, and we discussed starting afresh in LA and naming the new organization Nightfire because I thought it sounded cool and implied the goal of getting good enough to go on at night shows. As before, we knew the brass would be the main issue, but we ran into a possible open door to get some on the cheap, the U.S. Air Force Academy. The Flight of Sound had been the student corps at the Academy for decades, and at the time played on 2-valve G bugles, and were transitioning to a new line of 3 valves. They were going to put the old brass up for donation. All we had to be was a non-profit, which we were at that time. I contacted the corps director and found out how to apply to have the brass donated to us. Long story short, we got it through the Parks and Rec division of City of Los Angeles, which would come back to haunt us. The only cost was shipping to California, which Jeff covered, but there were issues. No contras at all. Made sense given the cost that they'd hold on to them. Only one euphonium, listed as a French horn. We did not get the full line of instruments. Either they held some for reserves or someone elsewhere. This meant a very thin bottom sound, something we needed to rectify. We had plenty of baritones, mellophones, and sopranos, so the upper voices were covered, but if we put every horn on the field, the blend and balance would be awful, even with experienced players. But even so, we had crossed the first and largest barrier, the lack of contras being the only real hang-up brass-wise. Over time, we got insurance by becoming an explorer troop of the Boy Scouts, a rehearsal site at a local high school. Use of their drums, such as they were, didn't really have a battery or keyboards. Did recording and ran an open house for January 16th, 1994. Auditions went well. We got what we felt was a full brass line, based on available instruments. It was small, but they were decent musicians. One of the baritones would end up going on to march 96 Blue Devils. No drummers stuck around due to the lack of instruments, but we felt we could work on that. We went home happy and looked forward to the future. Then came 4:30 the next morning, January 17th, 1994. The 6.7 Northridge earthquake with the epicenter about 12 miles from the school we were at. And yes, it was terrifying. Drum corps went way on the back burner and we all went into survival mode. I was worried if I'd still have a job as I'd been hired as a legal secretary the week before. Eventually, in 1995, we were able to restart and the brass line started learning the show. Repertoire included Procession of Bacchus, Reading Buccaneers 87, The Fire of Eternal Glory, Phantom 93, which we dedicated to a member killed by a car wreck earlier in the season, 93 Degree North, 82 Degrees West, using a venison I'd played at San Diego State in 82, and The Fire Dance, Garfield Cadets 81, plus a composed tag I'd wrote that combined elements of the earlier charts, similar to the NY Fantasy tag I'd play in BD. We even managed to get drill for the opener on the field. Unfortunately, the lack of any percussion stalled us, and we closed up shop for the season. What hurt me personally was I'd arranged the brass book, and the brass line had it down. It was the only time I'd arranged an entire show, and I wasn't able to record the last run. Oh well. 1996 rolls around, and we give it a try again. This time, things moved a little better, and we ended up with a complete corps. Small, with 8 brass, 4 battery, no pit, 4 guard, but we had a full corps in terms of the needed elements. We even managed to borrow a King K-90 Contra from the Freelancers. 17 people total, not enough to field a corps today. DCI wants 30 minimum, but the mid-90s were a completely different time. The show was Jekyll and Hyde. This is the same season that Pacific Crest also did Jekyll and Hyde, but because we would eventually go on an exhibition, and therefore first at any show, I can honestly say Nightfire was the first to ever bring Jekyll and Hyde to the drum corps field. This was also before the days of the lot, so there were actually people in the stands to see the opening corps. Unlike today, where the opening act can outnumber the crowd at a week show. Been there, done that, no fun. But we still needed uniforms, and didn't want to go back to the slacks and dress shirt route. Then we heard from Earthquake, the corps from San Diego. They wanted to borrow a mellophone, which we had extras of, and they weren't using the Freelancers uniforms, so we agreed to trade their entire stock for a single chrome-plated mellow. Unfortunately, this got us in a bit of trouble with the city of Los Angeles. Parks and Rec never really did much in the way of follow-up after being the agent that got us the brass. But the one time they did, they found out about the trade we made, and wanted to recall all of the brass, including the ones we traded. Jeff ended up dealing with them and took in our argument that we had too many instruments for a balanced line, and trading one horn for uniforms helped 2 corps, and that we, as a drum corps vets, knew far better than they did. Somehow, that won us the argument, and never heard from the city again. Huge weight off the shoulders. Work continued on the show, and eventually fielded at Glendora for our first show, and I was on cloud 9 from the moment of the first note, because we'd somehow gotten on the field, and no one could ever take that away from us. When we finally fielded with the 85 Freelancer uniforms, we'd occasionally change the color schemes on top, changing between shows, never in shows like the Freelancers did. One time, I think we went red main and the white fold-over, somewhat like the classic Freelancers uniforms, but most often than not we went white front and red fold-over. We never used the yellow, although one of the guys from the Pacific Sound era, we did do all 4, during a July parade in Coronado, California with the band instruments, set up top, so all 3 colors showed at once. He looked like, in his own words, a demented Power Ranger. We called the season the Carpool Tour because that's how we got around for our massive 4-show schedule. Personal notes on one show. The second show was in San Diego, my hometown. My mother was fighting lung cancer at the time, a battle she'd lose the following year, but she still came out to watch the show, something she hadn't done since Riverside in '84 when I was with Blue Devils, and she'd paid my tour fees. Surprisingly, my father came with her, and sat with her for the whole show, which is when he had a revelation. He'd never really understood why I'd moved to Concord to do drum corps, certainly not why I'd pay for it. But after BD finished its run, he turned to me and said, "Now, I understand." With a successful '96 season, we looked forward to coming back in '97. But it just wasn't to be. No one returned, recruiting was unsuccessful, and we had no rehearsal site or drums. We decided to throw in the towel and formally folded the corps. I don't remember where the brass went, but it was sent to other parties years ago. Looking back, one could easily use Nightfire as a cautionary tale. You cannot start and run a drum corps on guts and enthusiasm. You need people who know how to perform tasks like securing funding, rehearsal sites, recruitment, etc. You also need to have your act together and not let the kids see when it's going south. They will see right through you if you stumble your way along like we did. I suspect that's one thing that kept people away from '97. We may have developed a negative rep, and no one wants to march for that. In the end, I look back on '96 with a degree of fondness because we hit the field for 4 performances when we perhaps really should not have made it. That speaks to the stubborn nature of the kids who put up with a somewhat dysfunctional staff, myself included, who lurched from crisis to crisis like a drunk sailor to put on a product on the field in front of people. And I can take some pride in having 2 of the members, one from '94 and one from '96, go on to make Blue Devils '96 and Santa Clara Vanguard '97-'98, as well as a few members from the Pacific Sound days who also marched DCI, Velvet Knights I think, and one did '91 SCV. Would I do it again? No. It came too close to costing me my marriage at one point. It was far too much effort with too little return. You get tired of pulling teeth to get anything done, especially if the problems may have already been caused by your own inexperience. Just because you marched a top corps and almost won a ring, that doesn't mean you have what it takes to do the admin side, especially in one area does not make you expert in another. Every fan said at some point that they'd found a corps if they won the lottery. If I got that kind of money, I'd probably donate funds to support a corps, but would not get more directly involved myself. It was, perhaps, the wrong choice to lead a corps, but Nightfire performed in spite of my own faults and lack of experience. That says something. So, to the 17 members of 1996 Nightfire, you guys did good. Thank you. And to the viewer, thank you for watching.